Hello and welcome once again to Android Design in Action. As always, I'm your host, Roman Nurk.
Hey guys, Adam Kosh.
And here in London, Nick Butcher.
And today we're going to talk about, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about fitness apps, personal fitness apps. Actually, this is one of Nick's favorite categories, so he'll be doing lots and lots of talking today about Endomondo, which is one of the great apps the great app that we'll be highlighting today. And then after we cover fitness apps, and specifically some tablet stuff about fitness apps, we'll jump into modern UIs and more specifically some patterns that constitute modern UIs beyond just what you've seen on the design guide. So with that, let's jump in with Endomondo. So I'm going to hand it over right to, we got some flickering going on. Should we try to... Let's see if we can just unplug this and plug it back in. Hopefully that.
You're channeling the spirit of the App Clinic from last week.
Yes.
Technical issue.
Still happening.
This is a Wirecast restart.
Yeah. Should we restart? Okay. Let's restart. We'll get back to you in 1 second, folks. All right, so I think we're back, and hopefully the flickering has stopped. I think it's a little bit of the demo gods, that haunted the App Clinic for so long, giving us a little taste of their medicine. But anyway, with Endomondo, I guess we should start with Nick, since this is Nick. This is one of your favorite apps. Do you want to talk about Endomondo?
Yeah, this is one of my most frequently used apps. I would say do a little bit of triathlon in my spare time away from Android development. So I use this application to kind of track my training, and I'm a bit of a stats nerd about it. So if you've used a fitness app, it offers most of the common functionality of like tracking your workouts using GPS and logging it and so on and so forth. But one of my favorite aspects is that they've done a really nice job of following the Android UI guidelines and also integrating some fun stuff like quick contact badges and so on that integrate deeply with the Android UI. So here, the screenshot we're looking at, we can see, for example, an activity feed and your local history of the workouts that you've done. And I think you can see they've done a pretty decent job of following our UI guidelines.
You can see here, just to interrupt you, Nick, this is a very, very pitiful version of history. I don't actually do running or cycling or anything. That's really, Nick's line of work there. But this is just one example of what it could look like, after you capture an event. What it looks like, but obviously in a real-world scenario, you'd see a full list of things. Sorry, go on, Nick.
That is a very sparse list. Did you want to have a comment you wanted to make about the tap to refresh pattern we're seeing here?
Yeah. So I actually want to throw it out to you guys. Like, what are your thoughts on the sort of pull to refresh or tap to refresh kind of pattern? Personally, I actually like seeing the refresh icon in the action bar, which switches over to an indeterminate spinner while the refresh is going. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
So just to explain the pattern as is, because it's not clear from the screenshot, it's kind of a variation on the pull to refresh pattern. So here, so on the right, you can see Roman's activity would actually be flushed to the top until you pull it down, and then it reveals an extra option to tap to refresh. So in my opinion, this isn't working terribly well because pull to refresh, I guess, has some convenience. It's just one gesture, whereas this is like a gesture and then a tap. So you may as well just have the refresh button. For me, I prefer, like you say, Adam, the refresh button in the action bar, which turns into an indeterminate progress. Mostly because in Android, lists aren't springy. Like I can see this is a pattern from Tweedy on iOS, and it works pretty well on that platform because each list has this kind of springy characteristic to it, and so it works really well to overextend it to kind of do something. Whereas Android, you don't have that. The expectation is to have some kind of force field blow, or some kind of indication that you've reached the end of the list. So then to then reveal an extra option doesn't fit with the mental model for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that if you use something like tap to refresh, I guess pull to refresh. Really, our recommendation has been if you use it, then use it in addition to something like a refresh button in the action bar or even in the overflow. If refresh is automatic, or if it's something that users aren't really going to use all the time, then putting it into the overflow is totally acceptable.
And I think in this case, there's plenty of room to show an actual action item there. sometimes it may not be possible. You have to put in the overflow menu. So maybe pull to refresh might be more obvious to users then, I guess. But in this case, I personally would think it would be a good addition.
Totally.
Okay, should we push on then? So these two screens are the history and kind of the activity stream, the news feed. If we go ahead to next, so some of the cool functionality it has, which I really like, is the ability to find routes. So kind of routes that other users have created, which is awesome if you're traveling. So if I come out to California and visit the Mountain View mothership, I've used this functionality to find running routes in an unfamiliar area, which is fantastic.
Nick, do you mean routes or routes there?
I'm pretty sure I mean routes.
Okay, just checking.
And as well as kind of just seeing the route itself, you can have this concept of a champion, someone you can try and beat someone's time or that kind of stuff, all fun stuff. So these are fun features we wanted to pull out and highlight from the phone app. So as Roman said, I'm a heavy user of the app, a couple of times a day normally. So I've been pretty happy with using the application, but what I really feel like it's lacking is some tablet features. So if we look at what the functionality of the application offers on the website, there's actually some really, really useful functionality which I feel would be perfect to pull into the tablet application. So here, for example, this is the kind of the base workout screen, which you can use to track your workouts. And I find this really motivating because you get this like month view, which shows tiny little avatars of the activity you've done. And for me, it's kind of, this is one of the things that keeps me coming back and keeps me using the application. Like if I miss a couple of days and there's no way you can come back and fill in those squares, I love it when you browse back and you see like a fully populated month and see how kind of consistent your training's been.
Nick, you're a workoutaholic just looking at this. I mean, more than one item of exercise per day. That's kind of impressive.
Well, I kind of commute to work on my bike, which is kind of cheating maybe, but there we go. Yeah. So I think this is a really important piece of information which I thought would be super handy to kind of pull out on the larger real estate that you get on a tablet. And going on to the next screen, I think the other thing we wanted to talk about was some stats that you can pull out. Like I said, I'm a bit of a stats nerd, so I love being able to pore over my workouts and seeing, am I improving? Have I done more mileage? Have I done, faster average times? All that stuff. So I feel like there's a real opportunity to pull out some of this information when you have more room. Like when we talk about tablets, no one's suggesting that you're going to go running with a Nexus 10 strapped to your arm or in your back pocket. Like that's ridiculous.
Maybe a Nexus 7 though.
Even the Nexus 7. I mean, Rito put up a good point actually I hadn't really considered, is kind of sat in a gym maybe and you kind of on an exercise bike, for example, so you're using your tablet to watch a movie or catch up on the latest Android development on YouTube. But you might want to be able to kind of flick over to a tablet optimized interface on your workout app to capture that awesome workout you've just done. But for me, I think the biggest things I want to be able to do is kind of consume the newsfeed, see how I'm doing, pour over my stats, and also plan ahead, like look at the different routes that are available. So this is the kind of the major aspects that we've tried to incorporate into a reimagining of the application.
And one thing I want to just point out, there's this really small part of this website, I guess, in one of the panes on the side, that shows you, I guess, your the individual, I guess, the types of workouts that you've done, as well as for how long you did them this month, as well as how many calories you've burned. And I feel like that kind of summary information is fairly interesting to see on a month-to-month basis. So having that readily available, I think, also would be something that's interesting in a tablet or a larger screen UI.
Cool.
Should we move on to? I think there's one more. Oh no, we don't. Okay. So we took a look at Endomondo, and actually I talked to Nick about how he uses the app and what he would want from a tablet experience. And we took a look at what it could look like on a tablet, and specifically more of a consumption experience, providing more of like a consumption flow. Like you're sitting on your couch and you're planning what to do for the rest of the week, or you kind of want to just see what your current stats are. As well as like Nick said, if you happen to arrive in Mountain View visiting the mothership, I guess, what are the nearby routes and how to browse them in a very visual way. So we took a bunch of these things and we decided, let's create something that's like a really nice dashboard, and not a dashboard in the sense that it's just kind of just showing you navigational options, like the dashboard pattern where you'd see like 4 or 6 icons that would show no piece of content. This is really like a content-forward dashboard that shows you different aspects of the app, different aspects of the service all in one screen. So we focused on, I guess, the information hierarchy here is really like, your current workouts. That's the primary pane here. It's the center pane. And then second, I guess the second most important item on the screen is the social activity. Whether somebody commented on one of your events, or if somebody posted, that they've just ran like near a route near you, or a route near you, I guess. You want to see these things in a nice, easy to consume feed in the right. And what we've done is we've basically taken the existing feed from those handset screens, and we've kind of enriched the individual content items. So each piece of content here, you'll notice has more than just a piece of text. It has the time. It has clickable objects, like you can touch on Han to see details on Han, like a full profile page for Han. And then if it's a route that you may be interested in, maybe you expand the route into this kind of like a token or a content expando that's in there. The other thing I wanted to point out is that to take action, I think in the previous or in the current app on handsets, you can comment on something. There's this kind of comment button next to each list item, but there's no way to like anything. And I think liking is kind of or plus oneing or such. It's kind of like a lighter way to interact, to say, oh yeah, this is great. Congratulations. So just offering commenting versus liking seemed kind of to not.
I think the app has that actually.
Oh, okay. Oops.
It's not entirely clear from the UI, because the UI just looks like a plus and a comment bubble.
Uh-huh.
But if you click that, it gives you the option to like or comment.
Got it. So what we did here is instead we used a different affordance, basically the overflow affordance, to indicate that, hey, there are multiple actions you can take on this, and obviously you can long press you should be able to long press to select to take action, like multiple posts. But here, to take action on a single item, you can either long press to show the contextual action bar, or just touch this this overflow to show that there are multiple items or multiple actions there. And this is very similar to what Google Now does. So in Google Now, you have a bunch of cards to look at settings for a card or to take action on cards. Along with action buttons at the bottom, you can actually see this overflow next to each card. And then lastly, we've done this kind of unique presentation of nearby routes. So we've looked at let's say this app has information about the top 3 or 4 routes near you that you haven't starred or favorited. This is kind of like a method of bubbling up content. It's kind of like a content discovery mechanism. So you'd be able to swipe left and right between the different nearby routes, showing a little bit of data about how long they are, what percentage of users like them, and then what's the best time on that. And this is all data that's already accessible in the app, as far as I know. So this is a 10-inch landscape view. Actually, there's one thing I missed. On the left here, you have this kind of summary information, like this month. These are the activities you've done. This is how many calories you've burned. This is how much time you spent working out. Anything else you wanted to add, Nick?
Controversial use of the bold and light pattern that is being a little bit of a love it or hate it on the new 4.2 lock screen.
Yeah, and there's actually a combination of condensed here. So there's condensed and light, I believe. There's bold, light, and condensed versions of Roboto. So there's lots of typography going on throughout these mocks.
So my general feeling is I love it. I really like the 3 major sections that you've broken up into. So when you have a 10-inch UI, a 10-inch tablet with space enough to display these things, you kind of get this instant view of what's going on. You get these 3 major topics that I'm really interested in looking at. from the first thing. I mean, I'd love to be able to kind of tap through some of these statistics on the left, and I can imagine seeing some of those graphs which are available on the website being available on the device as well. That'd be wonderful. But yeah, I think the kind of you've done a nice job of like bubbling up the things I really care about.
And it's important to note that like this dashboard is very interactive. It's content forward, and the content is manipulable, right? So if you want to touch into snowboarding to see, all the different stats for your snowboarding for this month, you can do that. You should be able to touch that. The other thing I'll mention is that this app had more than just these 3 sections. So what I've done here is I've offered an action bar spinner to show you other parts of the app. So if you want to jump into like other sections, for example, not settings, because that should be in the action overflow, but maybe like I don't know, if you actually want to start capturing data on a tablet, maybe that's something that you should be able to do from the spinner.
Yeah, I think it's really important to stress that this is the same application as we just saw on the phone, right? I think it's completely okay to have a completely different dashboard, a completely different home screen when you're running in an entire different context. I mean, it's the same information that we're going to present through the application. It's just a completely different like visual treatment or priority, as it were.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, let's skip through a few of these other screens. So this is basically the portrait version, and what we've done is we've really tried to think, what does this screen look like in multiple orientations as well as on multiple sizes. I mean, it's not just a 10-inch landscape tablet world out there. There's portrait devices, there's 7-inch devices, and they're probably going to vary in size and screen resolution. So this is just an example of what a 10-inch portrait mockup can look like. What we've basically done is we've taken a linear approach to laying out this content. So the hierarchy is still maintained. The very topmost item is the most important thing, your calendar. The second item, the second row in the screen, is this horizontally pannable social feed. And the presentation here, I'll admit that it's not really refined. There's definitely a lot of work to be done here. But I mean, there's just one way you can start to think about this. And then that nearby routes section at the bottom is still there. So it's kind of taking up the same amount of space as it normally would. But again, all these sections are fairly flexible. You can potentially, actually, let me just talk about that in a bit. Let's look at the 7-inch layout, and this is where I wanted to mention that that top section, that calendar, it's flexible. You can potentially show another row of days at the bottom or top. In this case, you're seeing another row from February, and then you can scroll up. You should be able to scroll up and down to change the current month, and then you can rearrange the content from the left to the bottom. This summary section, and the most important part of this screen, I guess, is that on a 7-inch UI, you don't necessarily have all that space as you do on a 10-inch UI. So one of the things you can do for these dashboard type screens is to switch over into tabs, and these should be horizontally swipeable. So since there's no real horizontal interaction here, it should be fairly straightforward to allow swiping on the entire screen content to switch between your workouts, your news feed, and your routes, and those should all be laid out vertically.
I just want to call out as well that it's absolutely fine, like to use this margin point. Like, I really like the way you've done that in the 7-inch landscape, for example. Some people feel like you have to absolutely fill every inch of space on the screen, and that's just not the case. I mean, if you couldn't stretch this calendar to be so much wider that it would start to feel, like the wrong aspect ratio would feel ungainly. And it's absolutely fine to introduce a margin point here and just give enough room for it to breathe.
Yeah, and it's definitely a little more comfortable in a lot of tablet UIs to have some extra breathing room on the sides. I forgot who it was that mentioned this. There's a great post that talked about this. It is specifically around typography, especially when you're laying out type. It's not only about the measure, the amount of words per line or characters per line, but it really eases the strain on the eye to have nice, generous padding when you have lots of heavy content, especially text. So don't be afraid of too much space. Worry more about too little space. I think that too little space is more dangerous.
Yeah, and also where the space is on the screen. Like, you don't want to have things on the outer edges of the screen, like some list views which might automatically stretch out from a phone UI.
Yeah, you definitely want to have a great kind of distribution. You want to stand back from the screen and be able to see kind of a nice mosaic of content, not just stuff thrown into the left edge.
Yeah, have a squint at it and see where the weight of the content lies.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I think that was it for, and oh, no, never mind. We have some lock screen mockups from Nick. Nick, do you want to talk about the lock screen mockups?
Yeah, this is my number one request. Endomondo guys, please make this. I love the app, but it needs this. Lock screen widgets are finally here, and I think this is like a perfect use case for it, right? So we just quickly mocked up what it could look like. So here I am out on a run, and right there with my sweaty hands, I don't have to unlock the device just to see how fast I'm going, how far I've traveled, or to take action. So I've just mocked up here, just showing 3 of the major pieces of information when you have the kind of the collapsed view of the lock screen widget. It's telling me my distance, pace, and total time. And then if you were to swipe down to kind of expand out the lock screen widget, you would get the following view, letting you to kind of take action as well. So you can pause, stop, or resume if you already paused the workout straight from here. So you don't have to kind of like, you're out of breath, you're quickly trying to stop the time so that you don't miss your PB or whatever. So I think this is a really fun use case for lock screen widgets.
And just to point out, I really like what you've done here, Nick, with the use of white. So, I mean, you'll notice here that everything is either white, a shade of white, or I guess a transparent white, or transparent entirely. And the reason we can do this is that, since you're on the lock screen, it always dims the background. So even if the background was pure white, the dimming would actually make any white text or iconography on top of the lock screen still very much legible. So you definitely have the opportunity to use single color, monochrome icons and UI elements on the screen. And I really like what you've done with taking the play and the stop buttons from the app, which if you look at the app, they're actually green and they're stylized, and taking that and adapting it to what the lock screen looks like, which is really just white on transparent.
Yeah, it can be scary as a designer because you don't have any control over the user's wallpaper, obviously, so you don't know the backdrop. So yeah, exactly that. I didn't want to have some crazy clashing color. If you're going to have a green button, it wouldn't really work. So I just went for a really clean white to go over. I think it's about 45% opacity black over the top of your wallpaper to dim it down to achieve this effect. So
awesome. Okay, and this is just the last screen is what it would look like if you're actually in the paused state or a pause.
The resume state, yeah. So it gives you the option to pause. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so with that, let's jump into. We have about 7 minutes left, and fortunately, well, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, we don't really have much or zero design news today. So we'll just talk about some UI patterns that are beyond just the ones that you've seen in the design guide. So you guys have already, we've been, talking about action bars and responsive design and using typography a lot. So you guys have been probably fairly well exposed to these types of UI patterns, especially horizontal swipe to dismiss. We did some some mock-ups in weeks past that included those UI patterns. So let's look at some of the less commonly known patterns, and these aren't necessarily official patterns, but these are kind of they're really just community patterns, things that the community have been using, and things that we think that modern UIs should definitely take advantage of if it makes sense.
And by community, we mean the incredibly productive Mr. Nurek has made most of these and open sourced them. So you're very humble, but thank you, Roman.
Well, so
single man community.
so the code behind these, I've definitely written up a bunch of the kind of code snippets to show how to implement this, but they're really following some of the design practices from Android apps, from I guess first-party apps, from system apps, as well as from the community. So. But yes, we do have code samples for all of these, so if you have questions on how do you actually get to implement these, then let us know after the show. So first, let's talk about done and discard. We've featured this in the past. Basically, it removes the action bar entirely and replaces it with a very similar looking done and discard bar. So in really simple, in simple screens where you're just editing a form, like filling out some simple information or making some changes to a contact, for example, you could have save and cancel and up and back, but one of the alternatives is really to just show this very simple, straightforward done and discard or done and cancel bar at the top. I guess, do you guys have any other comments on this? I mean, we've talked about it in the past, but
Yeah, we talked about it. I like it a lot because it's completely unambiguous as to what's going to happen, right? You can. I feel it stays true to kind of what the action bar offers, but this visual treatment just makes it super clear what's going to happen.
yeah, and there's an alternative where the done button appears in the top left, and then discard is something like in the action overflow, and that's more useful if you have other actions that you want to show besides just done and discard or done and cancel, or if you really don't expect or don't want people to cancel. Like if you're saving a contact, chances are you're gonna make the change.
And I think that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. For example, take a look at, I think, in the system, in the people app, looking at editing or creating a contact, and I think also the same for creating a calendar event, right? I'll give you examples of this.
Yeah, I was just going to say that other form sort of makes it more obvious what, say, hitting the back button might do. Like, it would obviously save the content in that case.
Okay, so done and discard, that's one, we recommend this for kind of, again, simple editing forms. Screens that you're really just editing a piece of content, maybe not something that's terribly complex. Then pin in progress, and this is something that I'll very briefly cover because it's kind of less often used. And ideally, you save everything to your device. You cache everything and cache opportunistically. But in cases where you have movies or large files where it's clear that the action of caching or saving to your device is pretty heavyweight, you may want to give the user an explicit way to save or to pin content from the cloud onto your device. And so this is basically a little UI element that's a little pin button. It's kind of like a checkbox where if it's checked, then this should be pinned, and then in the background it shows the progress of the pinning. So if it's like a 300 meg download and the app is downloaded 200 megs. Then this pie chart should be somewhere about 2/3 of the way full. So very very simple little UI widget that you can use throughout your apps if you're dealing with very very heavy content pulled from the cloud.
So I really like this element as well because it discourages some people go down a kind of really explicit route of saying, am I in offline mode? Am I in kind of online mode where I'm going to stream or pin? And I think that's the wrong way to go, really. I think you should really have a single UI and then just hint to the user whether or not it's available offline. And picking up and following the cues that the Play Store and the Music app, which comes on most devices, use is going to be a good way to represent that.
Okay, so we got about 2 minutes left. Let's fly through some of these others. Does anybody want to talk about undo bars or inline undo? Who wants to do it?
I feel like Nick likes this one a lot, especially the inline one. But
So there's a great section in the design guidelines talking about when to prompt for confirmation and when to kind of offer undo. And so I'd work through that flowchart, but the essence is that you kind of prompting for confirmation for everything is kind of like a roadblock, and you can't really perform many actions very quickly. So preference to that is if you have a way to recover, then to offer this kind of undo action. As the name kind of like implies, this offers a way to recover from an operation you've just done, like archiving an email. It lets you undo to restore it back into your inbox. And as Adam says, this works, I feel, really, really well with in conjunction with the swipe to dismiss pattern, where when you swipe an item out of a list, say, it gets replaced with an inline kind of undo button, which lets you kind of like bring it back in from the side. I think that works really, really nicely. Take a look at the latest version of the Gmail app on Android 4.2 for an example of that.
Yeah, and I think if anyone's actually used one of these, you breathe a big sigh of relief. Like I deleted something, I don't know where it went, and then tapping undo to quickly bring it back is a great experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go to the next pattern, and this is a pattern. I guess Nick and myself, we've dubbed this quick return. There's no real official name for it, but the idea is that there's this is Google Now. This is a screenshot of Google Now. This is the idea that you want to have something that's persistent, that's always available, something like in Google Now, like the search bar, but you don't necessarily want it to take up some of that that precious vertical real estate. So what you can do is that bar can scroll off the top of the screen as you start scrolling down. But as the user starts scrolling up, ever so slightly, that bar, wherever you may be in the scroll area, that bar slowly starts inching back. And then as you kind of start scrolling further, the bar becomes fully visible, and it almost gives the impression that it's floating above the rest of the content, whether by using a drop shadow or whatever. It's really kind of pinned to the top without actually always being on screen. So it's readily available, but not always visible. It's kind of this nice duality there. Let's jump to another UI pattern. This is tokenized text fields, and I realize we're running a little short on time, so we got to fly through this. But the idea here is that rather than typing out email addresses and dealing with lots of free-form text, that be smart about it. And if you see something that is a piece of rich content, like it actually resolves to some object, replace it in the text field so that the user can interact with it like it's a real object and not just a bunch of characters of text.
I'm going to have to go, guys. I'm getting kicked out.
Getting kicked out? All right, see you there. I think that was the... no, we have one more. The last one is bezel swipe. This is Nick's favorite UI pattern. Basically, when you have horizontally scrollable or interactive content in the core layout of your screens, you obviously can't really use that for switching between tabs or exposing things like side drawers or navigation drawers. So the idea here is that you use the bezel, the leftmost and rightmost about 16 dips of the screen, where if you initiate your swipe from there, it's treated as a bezel swipe. So you're almost like kind of pulling the content from off the edge. This is what Chrome does, Chrome for Android.
Good example, yeah.
Definitely, actually, this is something that the new lock screen does as well, as far as I know. So this is another great pattern for always making horizontal content accessible using swipe, but also having horizontal interaction within your screens. I think that's the last one. So we're a little over on time, but I guess thanks again for joining us on Android Design in Action. As always, I'm Roman.
See you guys, Adam Kosh and Nick Butcher, who just left us from London.
Yeah, so we'll see you not next week, but probably in a few weeks. So, see you guys.
See you guys.
Have a great break.